So section 1.3 is equations and graphs in two variables. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is the distance formula and midpoint formula. These are ones that you should have seen before, maybe in geometry, maybe even in algebra 1, and then probably as a review in algebra 2. So what we're doing here for our distance, we're doing the difference in our x values and squaring it, plus the difference in our y values, squaring it, and then taking the square root of that. Now, what we are assuming here is that we are given 2 points, and they're calling them x1 and y1, x2 and y2. Same thing with our midpoint. Our midpoint, we're going to add our x values and divide by 2. And then
JJ, would you please go to room 22?
Add your y values and divide by 2. But again, we're still dealing with those same points. Call them x1, y1, and x2, y2. So given these points, so we have -1, 2 and -2, 3. We need to find the distance between them. So we can think of it as x1, y1, x2, y2. It doesn't matter which one you label as x1, y1, or x2, y2, as long as you're consistent. The ones need to go together and the twos need to go together. So to find our distance, we're going to take -2. Now, here's where you have to be careful. Minus a -1. So what tends to happen is people lose a sign there, so be careful with that. Plus -3 minus 2 squared. Then it's just a matter of simplifying. 2 negatives here would make that a positive. So we'd have -1 squared plus -5 squared. -1 squared is just going to give me a 1. -5 squared is a 25. So I'd have the square root of 26. Now, if that square root could simplify, you would need to do that. In this case, it does not. The next one is just doing a midpoint. So we're going to add our x's. So we're going to take -1 plus a -2 and divide that by 2. And then add your y's and divide by 2. Now, please leave your answers in fraction form. So I'd have -3 over 2 and -1 over 2. And that would be my answer. Questions on distance formula or midpoint formula? Okay. The next part is equation of a circle. So this is considered the standard form of the equation of a circle. Again, something that you probably should have seen in geometry. So we have x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared, where hk is the center of your circle and r is the radius of your circle. So the first thing that we're going to do is, given the center, so I'm going to give you a center, I'm going to give you a radius, and we want to write the equation of a circle. So really it's substitution. You're substituting into the formula or into the standard form. You do have to be careful because you do have subtraction signs here. So when you write this, the first one would be x minus h. Well, h in this case is our 2. So it would be x minus 2 squared plus your k value, which is -1. So we'd have y minus, and this is where you got to be careful, it's a -1 squared equals my radius squared, which is 4. Now, 2 negatives here again make that a positive. So my equation should look like x minus 2 squared plus y plus 1 squared equals 16.
Oh, she let me in. Thank you.
Hey, sorry, I'm a little late. It took me like a little while to start up my internet again, then scroll through all my emails to find the Zoom meeting.
It's also in Google Classroom, which you have that code. It might be easier to find
Oh.
it that way.
Shoot, yeah, I'll actually set that up. I didn't know you had a Google Classroom.
And I can make an announcement in Canvas too and put those in there too, if that would be helpful.
That would be, but you don't have to do that if it's on Google Classroom. I'll just join that real quick.
All right. Any questions on this equation of a circle? All right. So find the center and the radius. So this is going the other direction. So I'm giving you the equation. I want the center and the radius. So when you're looking at the equation, if you remember back, it was x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Now, if you look in the equation, it has a subtraction sign. Okay, so what we're doing is really we're going to look at your numerical part, which is a -1. Well, if you look at that compared to what's at the top, we have negative h. So our h value is really just 1. And our k value over here, if we look, is just 2. So a lot of people think it's opposite of what's in the parentheses. So if I see a -1, my center is actually, my x value is 1. If I see a -2, then my y value is 2. The radius would be the square root of 9, which then is 3. Questions on going that direction? So if they give you a center and a radius, you should be able to write the equation. If they give you an equation, you should be able to come up with what is the center and what is the radius.
Yeah, don't change that. Oh,
Oh, okay,
well, yeah, I just need to write that down. I'm sorry.
you're fine.
All right, I got it.
All right, so go ahead and find the center and the radius of this circle. Did Answer ever join? Or Olivia? No. Okay, somebody tell me what the center of this circle is.
-3, 4.
-3, 4. Somebody else tell me what the radius should be. Haley, can you tell me the radius?
Square root of 12.
Square root of 12. Now, with the square root of 12, we would need to simplify that. So remember 4 times 3, square root of 4 is just 2, so we would have 2 square root of 3. So make sure on that, if you can simplify the square root, that you simplify. So This is in the past been a common question on the test. I don't know exactly what's on this first test or on the quizzes. I have not created them. They're actually given to me by Missouri Western. So this is an option. This is something that you could be given, or a type of question that you might see on the homework. So if they give you a circle and then they give you 2 points on that circle. So, oops. So they gave you a point here and a point here, and they are on a diameter. So if you remember, a diameter goes all the way across the circle and it goes through the center. So they're going to give you a point, and we're going to call this point AB, and we're going to call this point CD. Okay. Now, what we have to find, so if you think in terms of an equation of a circle, we need the center of my circle and I need the radius of my circle. And if they're giving me these points on the diameter, they're not giving you any of that. So we have to be able to find it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go back and use those formulas at the very beginning. We're going to use our midpoint formula with the given points to find the center. So we're going to find the midpoint between these 2 points. And the midpoint would be the center of my circle. That would be my HK. That would help me find my center. So we would find our center by using the midpoint. Now we have to find our radius. So once we know the center, we can find this radius here by finding the distance between those 2 points. So it says we're going to use the distance formula with one of the given endpoints and the center to find the radius. So we're going to use the center that we found, one of the points, it doesn't matter which one, and we're going to do the distance formula between them to come up with our radius. So we're going to use our distance formula to find our radius. So once you have those 2 pieces, then we can substitute into our equation for our circle. Okay. So this is just saying, if this is the type of question they're giving, if they give you the diameter or endpoints of the diameter, your first thing you have to find is the center. And you find the center by using the midpoint formula. Once you have found the center, you have to come up with the radius. To find the radius, you use the midpoint and one of the given points. Use your distance formula to find the radius. Once the 2 pieces have been found, so once you found the center and the radius, then you're going to plug into that standard form of the equation of a circle. Questions on that? Okay, so the next thing that we're going to have to do is I'm going to give you an equation that looks something like this. X squared plus y squared plus 6x minus 5y equals a negative 1/4. And by looking at that, it doesn't look like that standard form of the equation of a circle. So we want to change this to where it does look like the equation of a circle. So we want to make it look like our x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So that's our objective. We want to get to that point. So our first step is to rearrange. So when I say rearrange, we're going to get all our x's together and our y's together. Now, when we do this, we're going to add some things in here. So we're gonna say x squared plus 6x plus, and then I'm gonna put a blank. And the reason I'm doing this is because we want to get it to look like this. So we're gonna have to kind of change our problem a little bit to be able to do that. So then we're also going to put our y's together. So we'd have y squared minus 5y. Again, we're gonna put plus something. Now that's still equal to our negative 1/4. But if I put 2 blanks on the left-hand side, I also need to put 2 blanks on the right-hand side. So what we have to do is we have to figure out what number can I put in this blank to make this a perfect square. Okay. So the second step is we're going to take the coefficient of the linear term. We're going to divide it by 2 and square it. So we're going to take the coefficient of the linear term. So our linear term is the term that just has an x here. We're going to divide it by 2 and square it. So we're going to take 6 divided by 2 and square it. Now, when I do that, 6 divided by 2 is 3. 3 squared is going to give me 9. So 9 is what's going to go in the blank here. But if you think about an equation, you always have to keep it balanced. If I add 9 to one side, I must add 9 to the other to balance the equation. We're going to repeat that same process with the y's. So I'm going to take negative 5 divided by 2 and square it. That's going to give me 25 over 4. So when you square a fraction, square the top number, square the bottom. So again, we're going to put that in our blank. So 25 over 4. But again, what you add to one side, you must add to the other to balance the equation. Now, if we look at these first 3 pieces, what we have to do is we have to think, okay, that factors. By what we're doing, we made a perfect square. Okay, so we made a perfect square binomial. So it factors to x plus 3 times x plus 3. Well, another way of writing that is x plus 3 squared. And then that's making it look like what we want it to look like. We want it to look like that standard form of the equation of a circle. Now, that one is not too bad to factor. 2 numbers that multiply to 9 and add to 6, 3 and 3. But this next one's a little harder because it's fractions. Now, there is a little way to figure this out that makes it easier. Whatever number is inside the parenthesis here is the same as the number that's inside the parenthesis here. So 6 divided by 2 was 3. So then we see a 3 down here. That will work, and that's how you're going to factor these ones with fractions. So in this case, we're going to have y minus 5 halves squared. Whatever is here is also here. Equals, now we have to simplify. We're going to combine these numbers on the right-hand side. We have negative 1/4 plus 9 plus 25 over 4. If we add the fractions, that gives us 24 over 4, which is 6. 6 plus 9 is going to give me a 15. Once we have that, then we can determine our center and our radius. Our center would be a negative 3 and 5 halves. And our radius would be the square root of 15. So if we're looking at our steps, we're going to rearrange. We're going to take the coefficient of the linear term, divide it by 2 and square it. Then we created our perfect squares. So create your perfect square binomials. The last thing that we did was we simplified. So we simplified everything on that right-hand side, combined those terms to get our 15. And we found our center and our radius. Questions in that process? Anybody having issues with that? So let's try another one. This one is saying find the center and the radius of the given circle. So again, our first step is to rearrange, get all our x's together, get our y's together. Remember, I'm going to put my blanks in here. If I put 2 blanks on the left, I must put 2 blanks on the right. Gave myself room. Okay, so rearrange was our first step. Our second step is to take the coefficient of your linear term, which in the first one is -4, divide it by 2 and square it. -4 divided by 2 is a -2. -2 squared is going to give me a 4. So I'm going to put a 4 on the left, but I also need to put a 4 on the right. We've got to balance that equation. Do the same thing with the y's. So 8 divided by 2 and square it. So that gives me 4. 4 squared is 16. Again, if I have a 16 on the left, I must have a 16 on the right. Now we can go ahead and skip to our perfect square binomials. So again, remember, whatever's inside the parentheses is what goes inside of the other one. So our first parenthesis should look like x minus 2. The second one should be x plus 4, again here and here. Then we need to combine, so we'd have -10 plus 4 plus 16, which is going to give me a +10. And then we need to find our center and our radius. Your center here would be 2 and -4. And your radius should be the square root of 10. Questions on that? Okay, so the next part is finding x and y intercepts using equations of lines. So what you may need to remember about an x-intercept, it's where it crosses the x-axis. So when you cross the x-axis, your y-coordinate is always going to be 0. So how do you find the x-intercept? You're just going to plug 0 in for your y. So your y value is going to equal 0 every time you're trying to find your x-intercept. So in this case, we'd have 3x plus 0 equals 6. And we would solve and get x is 2. Now, when you are finding intercepts, it always must be written as a coordinate. So if we were to write this, this has to be written as 2, 0. You cannot say that the x-intercept is 2. I want you to write it as a coordinate. Now, if we were finding the y-intercept, your y-intercept is where it's crossing the y-axis. So when you're crossing the y-axis, your x value is 0. So you're gonna plug a 0 in for your x. So we'd have 3 times 0 plus y equals 6. And we get a y of just 6. Again, this has to be written as a coordinate. So we would have to write this as 0, 6. So with these intercepts, we can graph them, the equations of the lines. We just plot the two intercepts. So we have a y-intercept of 6 and an x-intercept of 2. So plot those 2 points and connect the points. So for a x-intercept, your y value is 0. For a y-intercept, your x value is 0. The last thing that I want to talk about is vertical and horizontal lines. So if you have y equals 3, that means your y value is 3 no matter what your x value is. So if I had an x value of 1, my y value would be at 3. If I have an x value of 2, my y value is at 3. So if you think about that, if you have infinitely points, we're creating that line. So when you have y equals 3, you're creating a horizontal line. Now, when you're dealing with x equals 4, that means your x value is always 4. So in this case, you're dealing with a vertical line. Okay. So when you have x equals, it's always vertical. And when you have y equals, it is horizontal. Now, the homework for section 1.3, I have moved back. It is not due tomorrow, it will be due on Friday. Homework assignments are due by 6 o'clock, not by midnight. So please make sure you're completing them in time. So you should have today, tomorrow, and sometime on Friday to finish whatever you need to finish. You also have a quiz. Quiz 1 covers section 1, 2, and 3. And the quiz, you get 3 attempts, and it is due on Monday. Questions on anything so far? Okay. That's all I have for today.